Vote Rejoin EU.
Vote Rejoin EU.
Hello, I'm Brendan Donnelly. I'm the leader of the Rejoin EU party. I used to be a Conservative MEP, and now I'm no longer either of those things.
Now, it seems like a funny question, but why are you here today?
Because we have a conference, our inaugural public conference, which is also a kind of an AGM, to be in touch with our supporters and to enthuse them and to give them ideas about what we're intending to do over the coming months and years.
Why are you supportive of the Rejoin EU party and their mission to rejoin the EU?
Because I'm very angry about Brexit, and I always have been from the word go.
I'm here because I thought it would be a great opportunity to learn more about what the party has been doing in relation to strengthening the UK's relation with Europe and looking about what the next steps are for an issue that is we all care about a lot, but we're not sure sort of what steps can be taken, and so having those discussions I think is really valuable, and I thought it would be a very insightful experience for me to come here in person and have the opportunity to meet some people.
Hi, my name is Max, or Mark. I run the Robespierre channel and I talk about Brexit and British politics.
And why have you come to the Rejoin EU party conference today, Max?
Because I think it's so important that Britain rejoins the European Union because its home is in Europe.
I feel that for the UK we're now in a very, very exposed position. We are outside the EU and NATO is falling to pieces under Donald Trump, and leaving us where we're absolutely exposed and vulnerable.
It was wrong that we had to leave in the first place. It was a rigged referendum, and there shouldn't have been a referendum on such a very complicated subject.
I'm here because we need to make the point that reversing Brexit is inevitable. Brexit has an expiration date, so the only question is how many people are going to allow to suffer between now and that date. It makes no sense to allow people to keep suffering in poverty, the extra damage to the NHS, the extra poor health in the country, when we know where this is going. It's utter cowardice that we aren't tackling this harder in Parliament now.
Hi, I'm Richard Morley. I'm the Deputy Rejoin EU leader, and I come from, various places, Tunbridge Wells in England and Berlin in Germany.
And it may seem like a strange question, but why are you here today?
Well, because Britain needs to rejoin the EU for its own, shall we say, survival in the future, and I want to do whatever I can to help their process.
And how would you say Brexit has impacted you personally, or the lives of those people that you care about on a personal level?
Well, much of it comes down to the economy, of course. Brexit's had a massive impact on the economy. In my job as a lawyer, I see impact on families across this country having less money to spend, the impact that has on deprivation, the impact that has on children. I've got friends who work within the farming community. The impact it's had on them is quite huge. I have friends who have an import-export business. The impact it's had on him is huge. So it's had an impact on all of us.
The impact of Brexit on Europe is that it's like losing a bit of a friend.
Well, it has caused a great deal of stress in our business. We have a family business. It has done serious damage there, but most of all to the young people in my family who no longer have the opportunities that they had, which I had, to go and live, study and work abroad, which of course is good for their cultural experience, for their general, shall we say, experience in life, and they can't do that. Also, my elderly relatives can't go and get their place in the sun, which of course they always wanted to do in their old age, and now of course it's so bureaucratically complicated to do that. So it affects everybody, in my opinion, in many, many different ways.
Well, it's made the cost of living crisis worse. According to the Bank of England, Brexit is costing the average household about £1,000 a year, and it's made food more expensive, and that is making everything harder for everybody. Right now, especially my generation, struggling to pay for rent, struggling to pay for food. Anything that is making things that much harder should be taken off the books as fast as possible.
I would say, obviously, at the time of the referendum I was too young to vote, but I was very much old enough to understand the consequences at the time that we did leave, and it's definitely impacted me and a lot of young people because it's taken away our freedom of movement. I think for me personally that's the main thing, because I used to have the opportunity to live and work in or any EU member state. I could have gone to university, as was said earlier, I could have gone to university in a country where it was free, and I'm now stripped of those opportunities that I had no say in. And especially when we look at the vote, which was majority elderly people voting to leave and most young people voting to stay, and I didn't have the chance to do that. I think it has been quite unfair on my future, and there's a lot that I've missed out on.
And why are you personally so invigorated and of course supportive of the mission to rejoin the European Union?
Well, because so many people recognise that Brexit's a mistake, and yet for some reason not everybody who recognises that Brexit is a mistake wants to rejoin. I think there's a certain amount of apathy, but I think it's also a success for the Brexiters that they can put the lid on discussion of rejoining, and it's our job to prise that lid off.
How has Brexit affected you personally?
It's affected me personally. It's affected all of us personally in that it's added to inflation for starters, but it also affected me because I'm a lorry driver. So our work conditions have got worse. We work in longer hours. The wages have gone up, but not as much as inflation. The company I was working with when Brexit happened shut down because they struggled getting drivers after EU drivers went home. So I had to get a new job at that point. And it's affected my whole life, as in I've become a political campaigner because of it, really.
Well, I have so many friends and family in Britain, so it's become much more difficult for them, and of course for me as well, to visit, to interact with them.
Well, everybody in the country has been affected by the fact that we've lost something like 4% of GDP as a result of Brexit. And that has implications for government expenditure, for local expenditure, for the whole economic texture of the country. Nobody is unaffected by this.
And what would your message to the government be?
Put your finger out, do something, especially after the Trump's and Elon Musk's behaviour.
Just rejoin the EU, stop messing around. Look at what's going on around the world. Look at Trump. Forget this USA trade deal. It's going to do nothing but hurt us. Trump says himself, America first. How much more do you need to hear?
My message would be, drop this nonsense about not wanting to rejoin the EU and be very positive and pro about it.
Be more courageous, be more decisive.
Well, my message to Keir Starmer would be to become socialist. I don't actually see any socialist policies coming from Keir Starmer. What I see from him is a dogmatic approach to try to solve the country's problems with an outdated policy to try and make, shall we say, make economics fit in a way that mathematics don't compute. It doesn't work and it never will work, and we ought to tell him that as the general British public.
You can be as rude as you like.
Rejoin the EU as soon as possible. It needs doing urgently.
My message to Keir Starmer is you're scared of going against Brexit because you think that will give the right and Nigel Farage ammunition to use against you. But if you don't fundamentally undo Brexit, you will not be able to improve people's living standards fast enough by the next election, and then the right, Nigel Farage, will use the fact that you have failed to do so as a reason to vote against you.
And I think if they want to tackle the crisis in this country, they have to tackle the wealth gap problematic, the economical problems, and that is sadly linked with Brexit.
I would say, be radical, and I think that's what, you're meant to be the party of the working class, the party of young people. Don't be afraid to be a bit radical, especially when polling data suggests that most of the British public believe Brexit was a mistake. Even just saying join the single market, don't rule that out. Just be open and know that what you're doing is what's right for the country. Don't be afraid to be a bit radical. Don't always feel the need to play it safe.
What would your message to Keir Starmer's Labour government be today?
To not be so negative, to allow the possibility of rejoining, and although it's going to take some time, we must start now by planning it now.
If you want to win the next general election, you have only one option. You've got to rejoin the single market and the customs union. If you're going to do that, you might as well go the whole hog and rejoin the EU. Otherwise, you're not going to be in power.
And finally, what would your message for the UK government be?
You have to rejoin the European Union.
Vote Rejoin EU. Join the EU vision.